Right. It is a huge week for the Canadian Premier League before we even get to next weekend's games, because we've got two Canadian Championship semi-finals to take care of, the second legs, beginning on Tuesday night when Forge FC are at BC Place to take on the Vancouver Whitecaps. 2-2 on aggregate. Forge looking to become the first Canadian Premier League team to advance to the final in a full Canadian Championship tournament. They've been to a final once before, back in the technically it was 2022, but it was a 2020 competition. We don't need to explain how that quite happened at the moment, but they were there. They lost to TFC on penalties. It was heartbreaking. They'd like to reverse that this time. But let's start by previewing this first semifinal. AGR, will come to you first because you follow the Whitecaps quite closely. I know that they beat Philadelphia 7-0 over the weekend. Thomas Muller had a hat trick and an assist. They are the heavy favorites for this game, but maybe you can give us a sense of how much of a priority this competition is for them, and how they might approach this semifinal.
Yeah, this Whitecaps team is something's brewing. I mean, something was already brewing with the CONCACAF run, and you kind of worried about a drop off, and there was a bit of a drop off for many reasons. But then, what a way to respond to that by signing a guy like Thomas Muller, and now it feels like they're finally a bit back to full speed. I mean, again, for context, for those who don't follow MLS as closely, Philadelphia Union were first in the entire league. It's not like they dismantled some team that fodder. Like, they dismantled one of their rivals for first place in the Supporters Shield race. So for the Whitecaps, we know what they're capable of. And the thing is, they want to win everything. They're going to prioritize this competition because I think they've made that clear. Like, when they played Valor in the quarterfinals, there were questions of how seriously going to take that. They put out a lot of strong players in both legs. They rotate, no doubt, but they've rotated all year. They've gone to Mexico and played, backup center backs, backup midfielders, backup forwards. I think that's one of the strengths of this team, is they've built one of the strongest teams in the league in terms of 1 to 18, so that if they're playing their backup center back, their backup midfielder, things are going to go all right. And sometimes it hasn't. Leg one against Forge, they rotated and maybe it cost them a bit. Bjorn Inge Utvik had a bit of a tough game, but he's gone, and they've since
not even there.
They've upgraded the center back position, and maybe in response to what happened that game. So for the Whitecaps, I expect a strong team no matter who plays, and I expect they're going to take this very seriously because they know with the momentum around this team right now, with what's going on, what they're chasing, losing a game like this at home would be just such a momentum sapper. So they're going to want to keep that going.
Yeah, I think so. And just to come back to you before we bring Mitch in on Forge, can you give people a sense of just how different a Whitecaps team this is from the last time, the one that played in Hamilton? Obviously Thomas Muller's there. Ali Ahmed wasn't fit last time, and we just saw him playing so well for Canada. There's a few other new faces. Just how different a challenge is this for Forge?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Thomas Muller's the big one, and he's been exceptional, right? 5 goals already, an assist. He's just kind of elevated everyone around him. Ali Ahmed being back and fully fit is a game changer. He was dynamite against Philadelphia. Then they've obviously upgraded the back line. They bring in the experienced Sebastian Schonlau, and then they also bring in Jodrik Pupe. For what it's worth, I don't think both will be available for this game as they've been battling injuries, so the back line doesn't change that much. Brian White is also dealing with the hamstring issue and will miss this game. So the Whitecaps aren't quite at full strength in that regard, but I think just Muller coming in has kind of elevated everyone. So you see a guy like Emmanuel Sabi, he's been in really good form. And I think he's been one of the biggest winners of Muller coming in and opening up a bit more space for him.
Yeah, it's crazy how you just plop one of the most iconic attacking players the last 20 years into your team, and suddenly you're a lot better and more confident. Mitch, this is without doubt one of the most difficult tasks I think Forge have ever faced. Mid-season, midweek, playing against arguably the best player they've ever played against in Thomas Muller. There's not a lot of other names that would compete with that. If you're Forge, I guess, what do you have to do in this game to give yourself a chance and find a way to complete this upset?
I mean, I'd say unquestionably the best player they've ever played against could be the best team they've ever played against. Certainly the best MLS team
Yeah,
they've played against in this competition, as we've seen, the
absolutely.
down years of CF Montreal and Toronto FC that they've competed against in the past few years. So there's going to be a whole nother level of task. And as AGR mentioned, a whole nother task from what they did in that first leg. I think it really comes down to how well they play defensively. I think this is a team that has goals in it, obviously, and they can score against the likes of the Whitecaps. But you mentioned all the weapons, and I think it is helpful that Brian White's not there, because other than maybe a Jaden Nelson, that's the guy who gave them fits in that first leg. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, like, the Whitecaps just have so many different players that if you switch off for even a second, they're going to hurt you. You saw what Ali Ahmed did down the wing this past week. We know what Jaden Nelson can do. We know what Emmanuel Sabi can do. Like, it just goes on and on. So they have to be defensively resolute. They have to be willing to suffer for large stages of the match. And, you know, we know they love to have the ball, but if you are in that defensive shape, not get desperate, not step out somewhere and allow a little bit of an extra space. I think that's going to be essential to what they do. And, we're going to really learn a lot about a guy like Yassim Kleilat, a guy like Dan Nimick, what he can do at this level.
Yeah.
Like, those players who've been the pillars of that defensive unit all year, we're going to really see them now stress tested like never before. And, I think it's a really exciting prospect, because this Forge team will go in with that belief that they can beat anyone in this country. This is the biggest test they've had yet, and this Whitecaps team is excellent. They're three-time, three-peat champions for a reason. This is going to be a big test for Forge. They're the heavy underdogs, but we know that they have that belief that they can get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And you're right. It's a huge test for these defenders, especially somebody like a Dan Nimick, who hasn't been in a lot of these situations with Forge. Hasn't played playoff games for Forge before. Played a couple of those CONCACAF Champions Cup games earlier this year, but this is a huge test of his mettle in these situations, and it is a game where Forge will be much more uncomfortable, I think, than usual. Probably won't have as much of the ball as they're used to. Will have to suffer, and so that's kind of the biggest test for that one. But it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 Pacific, Tuesday night on OneSoccer and TSN. So no excuses for missing this one. One of the most interesting games in Canadian soccer, club soccer at least, for this year. Definitely don't miss that one.